Good morning and welcome to the 9:30 call here on this Tuesday, which feels like a Monday. It's great to have the commissioner here for her monthly visit, post the EEC board meeting, and I'm sure the EEC team, who I see many members here, will put links in the chat, how people can access the board meeting, the slides, all the things. But why don't we get started, Commissioner? It's so great to see you, and give us the update.
Great. Thanks, Amy O, and thanks 9:30 callers. It's so great to see you. And again, to have this kind of regular opportunity to check in following a board meeting, updating you on where we are. We always run out of time because there's never enough time for a conversation. But if there's items that you want to follow up on, I hope you will. So I'm going to start with a couple updates that I shared at the board meeting, and Chris is going to put the link to the board meeting materials as well as to the recording if you want the full 3-hour version. I'm going to give you the 30-minute version, which is kind of a good start. So a couple quick updates. The Early Educator Scholarship Program that we run in collaboration, we're going to talk a little bit more about this during the rest of the meeting, but the Early Education Scholarship for this year that EEC runs in collaboration with the Department of Higher Education, that deadline for application has been extended until November 1. So there is still time to apply. And over the last several years, we've been making changes to that program to make it easier to apply, easier to verify eligibility, adding new majors so that to be much more inclusive, especially of our out-of-school time and after-school colleagues, and our residential program staff, which was a big important change for the agency to make. We've also been doing a lot of outreach and promoting the program, and the total applications are up at 866 this year from 732, which was the end of the applications last year. So trending in the right direction. Total recipients already this year, 554, which exceeds last year's of 419. And again, still open and still time to apply. And we've also been able to expend our 3.8 million, which is up from 2.1. It's a total of 5 million, and we're really working to try and expend every dollar for our staff who are interested in pursuing scholarships and higher education opportunities. And we realize part of that depends on us breaking down some barriers and making sure that staff are aware of the program and are able to access it, and that it's linked to our new efforts on apprenticeships and career pathways, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But we are trending in the right direction, and I'll say this in a minute too, but Sarah Cian has been doing an amazing job for EEC on this program, and we are so grateful for your leadership, Sarah, and for putting the user experience at the center of what we're doing. And we'll hear about that about career pathways in a second too. I'm also really happy to announce that the FY25 capital grant applications are now open. We now have 4 capital grant programs, which is amazing. For a long time, the agency was very happy to be managing the Early Education and Out-of-School Time Grant Program, which for many, many years was $4 million for very large grants, so about 4 grants a year for large-scale projects. As many of you are aware, during COVID, we made some changes to make sure that those grant funds could be used to fix outdoor spaces and windows and HVAC systems, and really uncovered a big need for smaller grants. So we've been able, now with support of the governor and the legislature, we have $10 million a year for this program, and we're retaining both the large size grants as well so that we can do large size capacity building and renovations, but also the smaller grants that improve spaces, make them greener, make them more child-centered. One of the best parts of my job is doing ribbon cuttings for these capital grants program and see facilities and spaces that are designed for our children and educators. So we continue to exceed the amount that we have in applications, so we know that the need is great. We also, in the last year, added a small grant program for our for-profit programs that are serving a high percentage of children receiving childcare financial assistance. This has also been an important addition to capacity building. And finally, many of you are aware that we've been piloting with Mass Development, our first ever family child care capital grant program. I think we received 1,600 applications for that program.
Wow.
So they're just starting to weed through them now, but the need there is also immense, and really excited that we're working with Mass Development, who has experience working with small businesses, and looking forward to seeing the impact of that program on our family child care spaces and programs and providers. Just a reminder that that was a pilot this year, so we're going to be learning a lot, and hoping to continue that effort going forward.
And Amy, if I could just interject, tomorrow we're going to have Teresa Jordan and Kara Wilkie on from the Children's Investment Fund to kind of go through, because as you said, there have been additions, there have been different grants available now. And I think a lot of that is due to advocacy and folks just talking about facilities more. So I think the legislature heard it. We used to only get $4 million in the EOST, so now have $10 million is a big deal.
And it was authorized in the capital bond bill.
Right.
So in the governor's capital investment plan for the three ones that CDAC and the Children's Investment Fund will come talk to you about tomorrow, it's $10 million a year. Oh, no, that's just for the nonprofit ones. Right. Sorry. The for-profit one and the family child care were funded separately in last year's budget. So we're working on fully expending those funds, and we'll learn a lot through the grant processes about the demand with your help. And communicating the need. Obviously, as we think about statewide strategy for building capacity and access and affordability and quality, capital grants and capital improvements are a really important part of that strategy, along with childcare financial assistance and C3 and many of the other levers that we need to continue to push, including IT modernization. So I'm also very happy to report that in that capital bond bill that was passed, the Future Tech Act also include $12 million over 3 years. So $3 million a year to update and modernize our childcare financial assistance system. We took the first step in that process in posting an RFQ for a vendor to help us design a family portal. So really trying to transform the experience of families that are accessing childcare financial assistance, bringing modern, respectful, dignified technology so that they can do business with us at the times and locations in ways that make the most sense. Obviously trying to simplify it for providers as well. So we anticipate that being about a 3-year process, but we are eager to get that going. And as I told the CCRNRs when I met with them recently, we're also coming for Kinderwait, which is not a great system for us to be managing waitlist information and the flow of families through our system. So we will also be posting soon an educator portal. So for a long time, we've been talking about the importance of having educators at the center of our experience, whether it's seeking certification or credentialing, or being able to keep track of their certification with EEC and their professional development pathways, or even just being able to report on the number of educators that we have in the Commonwealth. So that educator portal has been a long time coming, and we're excited to roll that out, and we'll be rolling that out in collaboration with our work around a new credential. So it'll line up well on that and be hopefully an easy to use system. RFQ, request for qualifications. Thanks. Okay, and I also just wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to meet or hear that we hired a new deputy commissioner for field operations, Joe Rucker. He's joining us from the Department of Children and Families, where he held a number of supervisory and clinical roles, most recently the director of the Taunton area office. And we said goodbye to Andrew Rome, who was in that role when he retired in the spring, and Aaron Kraft, who many of you know, or all of you probably know well, who's our Western Regional Mass Director, and was stepping into that role and did a fantastic job as our interim deputy commissioner while we waited for Joe. I think he's in this maybe is the beginning of his 3rd week. So please join me in welcoming him. Okay, let me talk a little bit about what happened at the board meeting, and also let everyone know that we expect the November board meeting to be in Boston, so back at the Milk Street offices. We were in Quincy at our brand new beautiful office in Quincy, where our staff very much deserve nice, beautiful spaces to work in. And we hope families and community members will also use that space. There's a nice big meeting area. If anyone's interested, the office would be happy to welcome you there. So we'll be back at Milk Street in November, where we expect to provide an update on our cost of care work that has been ongoing. We also have a terrific research project going with Brandeis and Boston University that's studying the impact of last year's large-scale rate increase and reform. So we expect to be able to present. And we're also hoping to share some information about the Literacy Launch Initiative that we're working on across the Education Secretariat, and in particular with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and EEC. So the board will also be discussing its FY26 budget recommendations for those who are following along on our regularly scheduled timeline for that. Okay, so the board meeting, we talked about 3 big things. One is support for career pathways. I'm going to talk about that for a minute, and then the agency's first ever research agenda and key performance indicators. And then we also spent some time updating folks on childcare financial assistance. So I'll hit briefly on each of those things. And again, the board meeting is available on our YouTube channel, as well as the materials if you prefer to see the whole or see one of the discussions. We talked about this at last month's 9:30 call when we reviewed the FY25 budget, that the Career Pathways program, which is a partnership between EEC, 15 community colleges and Urban College, and provides really important entrance into higher education and EEC certification. That program was funded for years at 10 million, for several years at 10 million, and last year at 5 million. And I think the assumption there was that the Mass Educate Free Community College program would be picking up some of the loss of funds, and that we would be maintaining kind of the wraparound services and cohort supports that that program also provides. But as we heard from our Career Pathways partners and many folks in the field, that for many of our staff who are working full-time, have families of their own, that the Mass Educate eligibility of two full-time classes and matriculated into the university wasn't really working. And so the Career Pathways needed greater flexibility to be able to support 3 credit courses, or folks that maybe are seeking their AEC certification and then looking to matriculate and enroll. So elsewhere in the budget, we received 7.5 million in this year's budget for scholarships, and we decided nothing could be more important than making our Career Pathways program whole. So our board took positive action to enable us to use $5 million of those new scholarship funds for the Career Pathways program. And subsequent to our board's action, the Department of Higher Education and the Commissioner of Higher Education approved that action too. So we expect to be able to fully fund that program in this year and continue for students who are already enrolled or prospective students who are rolling in, for the staff in that program. It's just a terrific outcome, and I'm really grateful for our partners at Higher Education for stepping up quickly to make sure that no students felt a disruption in services. And again, many thanks to Sarah Cian and Ellen Grandine, who have been working with our partners at Higher Education to make this happen so quickly and ensure those resources were in place. There's an additional 2.5 million in the 25 budget for scholarships, and we anticipate adding that to the existing pool of scholarships, that same program I talked about at the beginning of the meeting, but again, using it to fill some gaps. So using it to fill kind of the pipeline and support students who might not otherwise qualify for the scholarship funds. So continuing to try and make those programs more accessible and responsive to our current workforce and the needs they have right now as they move on their professional journey. So we'll see if there's any questions on that. And again, sorry, Sarah, Cian, can you just put your email in the chat in case folks have specific questions about either Career Pathways or the scholarship program? We're having a number of sessions. Thank you. Okay, and then as I mentioned, we had an opportunity which was pretty exciting for us. Both the board as well as the agency over the last several years has been really focused on a data-driven agenda. And I remember having conversations with many of you, but one particular conversation out in Cape Cod where I was apologizing for the amount of data we ask from all of you, including for our C3 program, which we know is arduous. I remember that the provider I was meeting with out on Cape Cod said, it is really hard for us to enter all that data that you ask us for, but we see you using it. And so it makes us feel better about entering that data. And so I want to recognize our research team led by Amy Checkaway, Ashley White, who is our first ever director of research, and Adrian Murphy, who oversees our data and analytics team. And I think the agency has been really focused on making sure that we are collecting and using data to drive decision-making, policies, resource allocation as much as possible. We present the data when we have it at our board meetings, so it's available for all of you to use and understand both the impact on the field of programs like C3, rate increases, childcare, financial assistance. So what we talked about at the board meeting is really the longer term questions that we have around research, sort of what are the impacts of the system? How are children and families doing? How are they accessing our system? And you can see from the board deck some of the key longer term questions that we are asking. We have some amazing research partnerships, so really taking advantage of the rich higher education community with Brandeis and Harvard and BU to try and elevate and lift our field. All of this is about professionalizing transparency and making sure that we are aware of the impact both of investments over time as well as individual programs. So really excited about the research agenda. Complementary to that is really looking internally at the agency around our own operations on a regular basis. So this is a really important milestone for the agency. Most of the other agencies I've worked for DCF or Department of Transitional Assistance, we had regular dashboards of sort of our operations, how many licensed providers, how many kids in childcare financial assistance, how are we doing with families coming in and off the waiting list? So the agency has established, in collaboration with our board, a set of key performance indicators or KPIs. And you'll see if you look at the board deck that they have to be things that we can track right now, that are in our manageable control. So there are lots of things we'd love to measure and see, but we're starting with a set of KPIs that are available to us right now and that you and the agency can be looking at on a regular basis. So if you look at the board deck, you'll see what some of our key performance indicators are. And we anticipate posting new dashboards on our website, which will show things like license capacity over time by region, by type of provider, childcare financial assistance over time. Eventually, we'll have educator information on there. We have it now from C3, but hopefully through the educator portal, we'll have more real-time data on that. So our commitment is making sure that any data we have, you also have access to. So at the same time that we're building our agenda, building our research and data and analytics capacity, we're trying to bring that information out to those of you who are interested in seeing it, whether it's you, the press, our legislative colleagues. So really a very, very important milestone for the agency in terms of transparency and data. There was a lot of geeking out at the board meeting, so maybe this isn't the most exciting of our topics, but I really do believe that the more data and information we have about the system, the better we will all be positioned to talk about its impact and the transformation that we're all working collectively towards. Okay, I think I'll stop there on the research agenda. And then finally, we presented some information kind of digging into the data on childcare financial assistance. So if you look at the board deck, what you'll see is really the same data around our childcare financial assistance caseload presented in a number of ways, good for different learners and also good to understand it from different perspectives. So we have about 65,000 kids in the caseload right now, which is high. And we break it down by sort of our income eligible population, which is closer to 39,000, and then also our DCF and DTA populations. So those are our key kind of funding streams and populations that we serve. We also break it down by funding funding stream or how families access. So some families access through vouchers, as you're aware, and some families access through our contracts, which we just reprocured. So we break it down by how much is in our vouchers and how many families are accessing through the contracts. We break it down by region, and we break it down by age group so that everyone can see. I think the good news is we're serving 65,000 families. And I think when I came to the agency in April of 2022, we were closer to 57,000. So that's an enormous increase in the number of families being served. The harder news is that number of kids that we hope to maintain in the caseload means we're at appropriation. So last March, we had to put in some controls in terms of access from the waiting list. After pushing the accelerator very hard to make sure we could get up and spend every dollar that we were appropriated, we had to put some controls in place to make sure that we were living within appropriation. So at this point, we expect vouchers for new families coming off the waiting list, those controls to stay in place. That does not mean that access is closed altogether. We just reprocured new contracts. I'll mention that in a minute. We will have new families that are enrolling in some of those contracted seats. And we always remain open for our DTA and DCF families. Those programs remain immediate access as long as they're referred by DCF or DTA. DTA generally through our voucher system, and DCF either through contracts or vouchers in some limited circumstances. So we also remain open for continuity of care, which is really important to the agency. So making sure that families who are transitioning either out of DTA or DCF, or siblings are born into a family, or moving from a contract position that they don't have one in that program, that we make sure vouchers are open. So we are not shut all the way down, but we also recognize that there are now about 28,000 families on the waiting list, or children on the waiting list. And at the very top of that list are the children of our educators, who, as you know, we prioritized in a runaway success pilot program to make sure our educators had access to childcare financial assistance, and which is a big priority for the agency, and had real impact in the field, and is a priority for us and the board for sure going forward. So the very last thing that we talked about in terms of childcare financial assistance was just the reprocurement. And I'm just going to thank all of you who participated in the reprocurement process. I am incredibly proud of this reprocurement. I think it hasn't been done in 15 years. It took a lot after 15 years, you can imagine, to try and get it done. And our childcare the CCFA IT system didn't even exist before when these contracts were procured. So we learned a lot of important things through this process, and we're committed to doing continuous learning at the agency. And we knew it wasn't going to be completely smooth. So I just want to thank those of you who participated in the process for your grace and patience. The team has been working very hard to get it right. We have executed all the contracts. And we are trying to get out some of the kinks in making sure that both some of the new requirements and the new resources are available for families as quickly as possible. So we procured about 19,000 seats across the Commonwealth. We prioritized in some ways infants and toddlers, which is a huge capacity need. And if you look at the board deck, you can see sort of where we landed by region in terms of both and awards. And it's about 402 million total. Some of the big improvements that we think, really being clear about getting closer to the cost of care for providers. So adding some administrative dollars that were never there, pulling transportation out from bundled support services for our priority populations. And probably one of the most important things is just a commitment by the agency to work in partnership, not to be 15 years in the making, and to work in partnership on a regular basis as we implement and adopt the new requirements. We have 5 new family access coordinators working in our regions who are going to be dedicated to partnering both with our new our new contracted providers, as well as the EEC team and our childcare resource and referral agencies, DTA, Department of Children and Families, our shelter staff, to really make sure that we're breaking down barriers on the regional basis and implementing those contracts in the spirit in which they were procured. Okay, look, I even saved 2 minutes. That usually
Wow.
doesn't. I know.
I just think every time you come on too, you get a different appreciation, like where EE sits kind of in the ecosystem of government and how interconnected, talking about the board and Department of Higher Education, talking about how the contracted slots and voucher, like how that all works together. So just want to kind of call that out and appreciate that. I'm gonna read the questions because I think there are, and there's a lot of excitement about data and the dashboard. And Chris Power, thank you for answering questions in the chat. You're on it. Kim Davenport, was talking about the kind of the kinder wait, challenging wait list system management. It's so old and frustrating to use, and oftentimes we can't get what we want. There has been a significant investment of our IT over the year. Can we create a focus on adopting a new product? This seems central to the experience.
Yeah.
We would love to see EEC collect data on how our childcare leaders are doing. We're worried about the well-being, workload, and impact. And I know that Donna Danette sent information to the board about a 9:30 call that she did. The collection of data sounds great. Can you share how you decide what data to collect and how it's gathered? I'm also curious how family child providers are represented in the data. Do you have a way to measurement? Oh, and thank you for all of your work. So why don't we start with those if you have, and then, the other big question is timeline about, and I see Kim Dion is here too, about when access will be opened up.
Yeah, so I'll start with the research and data. So let me just say, like, we started with the data we have. So which is not necessarily the data we would want, but it is the data we have. So what you'll be able to see in the board deck is sort of the criteria we used to select which of our key performance indicators we were going to start with. And a lot of that has to do with the data we currently have that's available and that we know is requested on a regular basis. So you'll be able to see kind of the criteria we use to select what we were going to make, what we were going to focus on first. And then the research agenda gives you an idea of sort of the longer horizon about what kind of data we want to collect over time to understand impact. Almost all the data where we have it is broken down by family childcare versus center-based versus out of school time and after school, or at least by age groups when we have it. So we need the information on our providers, numbers, kids being served by providers, family childcare and center-based is also broken down in the data. On the procurement, I saw that there was a question about whether we were going to post that information. We will post who received
Right.
who received the grants. If it's not already up, it will be eventually. And then let me just finish. I know we're a little bit over time, just on the availability. Our ability to open voucher access will depend on additional resources at the current funding level that we received. And I need to do my job for a second and just say that the governor did request 914 million, and we ended up with about 872 million, which is effectively a level fund, even though we enrolled a lot of additional children this year. So at the current funding levels, we don't anticipate being able to reopen access beyond the groups I talked about. So DTA, DCF, and continuity of care, as I mentioned, will remain open. There are a number of families that are either in programs that did not receive a bid or chose not to apply. And so you will see the voucher caseload go up. We've been very committed to continuity of care. So any child that's currently in a contracted seat that will not continue to have access to that at their existing provider will be offered or has already been offered a voucher. So we will actually see the voucher caseload go up. Those new contracts do have something called a flex pool attached to them, which allows for DCF families to be involved, to be enrolled at any time. And for income eligible families, there's providers are able to go at least 5% over their contract award. So we will still see dynamics in the caseload and families moving and being enrolled, but we don't anticipate a lot of new families at this time being able to come off the waiting list at current funding levels.
It also sounds like that would be a helpful, maybe he would work with our friends at Mass Taxpayer Foundation and Mass Budget to really dig into that dynamic about what funding is available, who gets prioritized because of the funding and where it sits in the state budget. I'm sure Kim Deanne could also help out. Because I think this is, it sometimes can feel like a black hole when you're not even sure what we're talking about from the outside. And we know that parents are desperate. So maybe having that, and something Kelly asks kind of what is your, like, what can we do to help the most? And I know that I've heard the commissioner say stay together. I've used that the Boston Foundation last week. Anything else I think, and a lot of appreciation for you coming on once a month here. I mean, to have 174 people and then to have all the information from the board meeting that kind of you're just getting access to. We've recorded the call today. We will post it. But Commissioner, anything else how we can help kind of move this forward?
No, I mean, it's wonderful for us to be able to have this venue. I'm sure many of you can't take 3 hours off of your day on a Wednesday afternoon to watch the board meeting. So this is a really important opportunity for us to be able to share what's happening at the agency and hopefully connect you to the people doing the work that is most important to you. And I will just end where I always do, which is stay together. It's working. We have a lot of work to do, but there are incredible investments happening. And I hear from my colleagues in other states, and I'm sure Amy does too, that the work we're doing around C3 and even just being up at 65,000 in the caseload, even though it's creating a lot of stress for families and providers right now. And so, but the amount of data and I think organized collective support for early education and care through you, Amy, and the 930 callers, and our business leaders and our education leaders and our leaders across state government. And the last thing I'll just say, even though I know we're over, is that I am also worried about our education leaders and our directors. We heard it a lot at the listening sessions, and I hear it from all of you. And Donna Danette's research is we know it's really stressful for our program directors, and that's something that I think collectively, Amy, is an opportunity for us to be thinking about how can we best support our program leadership.
Yes.
So, all right.
Thank you.
Apologize for keeping you over time, and I'll see you all very soon.
So what we'll do, Commissioner, we'll send you and the team the chat. We will also, I think we'll send the chat to everybody because Chris answered a lot of questions in chat. So, and then we'll also, maybe we'll send the follow-up from today with the board meeting links, like all the links, so that people, because it's stay together and get accurate information. We know that's another challenge. And as ambassadors of good information, because I think people are busy and running programs and working with children. So we want to see our role as kind of helping connect people with accurate information and answering any questions. So we'll send the chat out tomorrow. We have Teresa and Kira on from Children's Investment Fund. And we have the 9:30 call at night in Spanish. And we have the early childhood agenda fall convening tomorrow on Wednesday. And we should welcome back Marissa Fear, who's back from her honeymoon. So welcome back, Marissa. And that
Welcome back. And congratulations. Awesome.
All right. Lots of thanks and
everyone.
appreciation. All right, Commissioner. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.